the lesson talking about creation. Dial here, he did a real good job last night. Kind of starting in the beginning, talking about the beginning. You know, the more I read the lesson, the more I guess it became flabbergasted with the lesson, that it seems so straightforward and so simple. But just read you kind of a little bit of it and start. The biggest part of evolutionist talks about the fact that, and the thing they cannot explain is life comes from nothing. And they can't get over the fact that life comes from nothing. So, you know, it talked about different people in the 1860s. Talked about Louis Pasteur, which we know Louis Pasteur was a really good scientist that did a lot of scientific studies. Talked about Darwin's theory of evolution. But the more you read this, the more you just want to say, why are you trying to prove something that we already can see and look at every day? I mean, we have science, we have the hand of the creation around us all the time, everywhere. And we can see it in the biggest parts of it, to kind of see the sun come up every day and the moon rise at the night to be the lesser of the two lights. We can see all the things that happen around us, and then we can get down to seeing a flower that is closed up in the morning and be opened up by the afternoon. We can see a hummingbird that doesn't look like it would be able to fly, be able to flap its tiny wings and keep its big body compared to its wings hovered and just hovering in air to the point that it can just suspend itself and be able to sit there and eat out of something you would put on your front porch. A bumblebee that's not supposed to be able to physically be able to fly because its wings are not big enough to keep its body. But it does. It can. So, you know, the more I read and tried to understand this lesson, the more I was just kind of flabbergasted with the fact of we have the Bible, and it was asked last night, was it a scientific book? And you know, I don't think the answer that was given was wrong by any means, but I would say that without the Bible, there is pretty much no science. Without the creation of the world, so I just looked up what the definition of science was. It says a systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and testing of theory against the evidence obtained. To me, the definition of science is the observation of what we see each day, and then the evidence of what that observation leads to. Is that a pretty layman terms of saying, so we live in a rural area. How many people have ever seen puppies being born? How many people have ever seen a calf be born? Cats, a baby, our children. But if you've ever witnessed that, how in the world can you not draw the conclusion that somebody designed that? That didn't just happen out of thin air. And so part of this book would talk about the theories of evolutionists, and then the other part would talk about the mathematical reasonings of what it would take for this to happen. And they said it was not like one blind person being able to take a Rubik's Cube and solve it. It would be like 10 blind people to the 50th power, all sitting down at one time and all being blind and all having a Rubik's Cube with as many different combinations as it has, be able to solve that problem would be even fathom the fact of how creation would happen by chance. So I want this to be a very, very interactive class tonight because, again, the more I talked about it, the more I realized you could just go in any direction you wanted to go if you just wanted to use the Bible. And so I thought we would just definitely take Christian evidences and use that, because to me, even though the books of the Bible, the Bible itself is about the creation of man and the world, and then the downfall of man in the world, and God sending His Son to save man in the world. And so it's all just repeats itself about how we obtain eternal life like we started before we sinned. It starts out with no sin and ends up with us being to be able to stand in front of our Maker sinless because of what His Son did. Shed His blood for our sins. So I think you can go in many different directions with that, but again, just Christian evidences, and I want everybody to just kind of be thinking and honestly interact a lot here about what goes on and why and how the Bible continues to prove itself, that shows that the science of the Bible, because the Bible is the basis for science. If God didn't create the world, then there wouldn't be nothing to observe to prove the basis for our theory. We have theories, and then we prove them by watching what science does on a repeated basis. You know, I was in a subdivision today. I'm a real estate appraiser, and in a subdivision, and this was a subdivision where obviously the same builder or same group of builders built a house or built houses that were very similar over and over and over. And the person that was with me said, well, it's obvious that these houses were built by the same builder because they all look alike. The key to having design is having a designer. If they'd have sent 10 builders in there or 20 builders in there and says, here's a pile of lumber, everybody run in there and build a house, the houses probably wouldn't look alike, would they? But when there's one common builder, one designer, he wants those houses to be designed to look pretty similar, does he not? So it's obvious to me and obvious to observationists, if you observe that you had one designer designing these houses, because there was about 3 different styles of them, but they were all very, very similar. And so you could see a common designer. Can we not see that today in our world? Can we not see common design in so many different things that we don't even think about? We take for granted until it happens, until it's kind of brought to our attention. So we talked about yesterday, excuse me, we discussed Genesis, the creation of the world. I thought tonight we would look at, somebody open their Bible to Genesis chapter 5. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. No. Mm-hmm. It is, isn't it? How they can continue to reproduce, and God set that all into motion. How does that get set into motion? By just evolution. How does that just happen from, again, the very question that evolutionists keep being asked and cannot answer is, how do you bring life from non-life? Where did life begin? Where did life start? So if you have life, then you can bring life. But if you have no life, you can't make something live out of something that there's not life. Mm-hmm. If he chose, yeah. Yeah. Sure. Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, and you put him or take him away from his kind, you put him with them, and he'll do his job and lay in the shade till he gets rested and does his job again. Or if you take him away from him, you better take him far enough away, or he'll find them. He doesn't go find a deer, or he doesn't go find a bear, or he doesn't go find something else. He goes and finds his own type, because that's what God put in us to be able to reproduce. He goes and finds his own type to reproduce with, and he'll fight you to do that. You're not going to hold him back. So you either separate him far enough that he can't see or smell. You're just asking for trouble. That's right, yeah. Exactly. No, yeah. And you put two bulls across the fence from each other and have a group of, like you say, hot heifers. They're going to fight for the survival of the fittest to see who's going to tire the other one out and then go breed the animal. I mean, that's what they're going to do. And so they're going to tear every fence down and tear everything in the world down until you can try to separate them with a pickup truck, you can try to separate them with a four-wheeler, you can try to separate them with a shotgun. And you just almost have to kill them sometimes. Sure. He'll stay right there and stay with them, and he'll watch them, and he'll protect them, and he'll lay in the shade and watch them, and then he'll get up and do his job. And then at the spring, in the fall, or whenever it's come to season to have calves, then you'll see his work. You'll see what he was doing. Oh yeah, sure. No, they understand. They understand that that's their offspring. They do. Who wants to read there for me a few verses here, 8 or 10 verses or so, 5 or 6, just of Genesis 5, chapter 5? Jimmy? Genesis chapter 5? Start at verse 1. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what does that say up there? When somebody wants to know where does mankind come from, what's the Bible say right here? God created them in His own image, created them male and female, and blessed them and gave them the ability to multiply, did He not? And He said from there came mankind. There is your answer that everybody keeps wanting to talk about, and everybody keeps acting like that they don't know where to go find the answer. Right there is the answer. It's as plain, as simple as you can find it. It says He created them, male and female, and blessed them, and called their names Adam. And they, when they were created, Adam lived and begot sons. I mean, it's a story. It's a story. It's a historical story of where this came from and where it is. And would somebody ask you, where does mankind come from? Right there, and that's answered. Now disprove it. Go ahead. In Lot's way, in His likeness. Yes, in His. Mm-hmm. But also, in His image means that every way I looked at that also, and you brought up the sinful image, but also in His image of He didn't have a fish, or He didn't have a calf, or He didn't have a turtle, or He had another person in His own image though. That's what I'm saying. So everything has by design in their own image. Now, you can look at theories of evolution, and you can look at gene mutation, and you can look at things that happen, and as a person that was raised on a dairy farm and went down to college and thought they ought to study a little something and study some animal breeding and all the things that you did, all the things that we did on the farm and why we did them, and figured out that our Father had already doing most of the things that we thought we was coming to school and learning, and then we figured out why He was doing them. We just went around like two old boys walking around with our heads scratching, fighting, and fussing, and wanting to either get out of work or go eat or whatever you want to say growing up. And then we go down to school and we come back and say, well, we should be doing this. And my father says, what do you think we've been doing for the last 10 or 20, 15, 20, 30, 40 years? Whatever it might be, you know. And he said, this is why I've been doing this. But what you learn is that, yes, you can have mutations, And all that comes about because what Jimmy said about the sinful nature of mankind, because before, if you had pure genes, you wouldn't have any kind of mutation. But since we don't have pure genes because of sin, then we do have mutations. So what we try to do with animal breeding then is we try to figure out which is the most desirable of the genes, and then you realize that there's genes that are recessive and there's genes that are dominant, and some are more dominant in males, some are more dominant in females, some are carried by, So I'll tell you an example of what you learn with animal breeding. If you're raising hogs, you want a sow to have as many teats as she can have so she can raise more, so she can nurse more pigs. But guess where that comes from? If you want your mama sow to have more pigs, you count the teats on the belly of the male, because that's more dominant if you want to breed it to the next generation than it is coming from the female. The male is more dominant about how many teats his daughters will have than it is on the female. And so you learn those things so that you can selectively breed. So I'm not taking away from the fact that you can selectively breed animals and domesticate them and do in a way and that they're survival of the fittest. Definitely come about, because if something's more fit, then it's going to survive better. And the ones that fight and do and are stronger, that's really, I think, God's plan of why the males fight over who's going to breed the females, because the strongest are the ones that need to survive in the animal kingdom. So the weak males don't need to be breeding the females, because that won't help the ongoing species. Huh? Yeah. Sure. The pride. The whole pride, yeah. So that's God's plan too. We got to realize that all the things that we think we've come up with, God put into motion from the beginning. He put that into motion from the beginning. So, again, the problem of evolutionists is we can have life out of nothing, out of no life. We can create life without an understanding of having a creator, that it just happened. So if you was answering one question as a Christian, where would you say the life is? Where is life in the body? Where is life? In the blood. So somebody go to Leviticus, to Leviticus 17, and let's look at verses. They're talking about the blood and different things and how God told us to treat the blood. But go to Leviticus 17 and go to verses about 11 through 14 or 15. Read that, one of you. When you get there, read that. Leviticus 17, verse 11 through 14, 15, just wherever it comes to a good stop. Someone? Okay. So again, where's the life at? In the blood. What was the first thing that had to be shed when sin came upon the earth? Blood. What's had to be shed for us to have eternal life? Blood. So again, every evolutionist wants to start with something came from nothing, but if you have blood, and everybody understands to the point of blood is made up of cells, if we have blood, we can have life. You know, even the other day, I heard that the USDA has approved growing what they call artificial meat in a petri dish, basically, or in a closed environment chamber that they think it's safe for human consumption. And I thought, growing meat. And so I thought, still not possible. Until they finally said one thing. They start with a cell. They start with a chicken cell. They start with an animal cell, and they have tricked it into reproducing. That's okay. I can live with that because you can have something from something, but you can't have something from nothing. You understand what I'm saying? We've learned over the years, and we think we're really getting smart, I guess. You know, think about in our lifetimes of what we have learned. We have learned that we didn't know, that we can go right back to the Bible and see that it was right there in front of us. We just didn't have enough sense to rightly observe it as a scientist. Think about all this. You know, we can do things. We can artificially inseminate cattle. We can artificially inseminate about everything there is. We can grow things in a petri dish. We can take an egg and a sperm and put them together in a petri dish and embryo transfer them and do all those things. But we can't create a human cell out of nothing. There always has to be something to start with. Now, has He given us the ability to observe and to learn and do things with it that we never really maybe dreamed possible? Well, of course He has. But the thing about it is, in that first 7 days at the beginning, or the 6 days when He created the earth, it was a common design, a common designer that created all those things that we're now observing as science to realize the replication of and observe, taking our theories and being able to figure out what God did. But we're not doing anything except just unfolding the world that He folded up for us. Every time we figure something out in science, it becomes real easy to understand because we figured it out. But until we figured it out, it took many, many, many observations before we could figure out what God figured out in the blink of an eye and made it all happen. And again, just in our lifetime. I know in my lifetime they talked about back in the late, maybe middle, early 70s that there was currents in the ocean. If you'll go back to Job, it says there's currents in the ocean. It was there for our learning. It was there to read about. It was there to do. We just never talked about it. We never thought about it. In our lifetime, they've said, well, now the ocean that covers 2/3 of the world has got currents in it. Well, the book of Job said it did. Why are you questioning it? You're just now, but after enough scientific observation, you're proving the Bible again. In our lifetime, what have they discovered? Think about some of the discoveries that they've made that are biblical in our lifetime. Think about, you always think about history as being somebody else's lifetime, but think about in our lifetime. Has Noah's Ark not been discovered? They've discovered where it is, and they've been working on, but they discovered it in our lifetime that it's a real thing and it's true, and they found it in our lifetime. It just proves the Bible story again. How many of you all have ever sat in a rocky place up on a hill and found relics of things that you would normally find in a creek, like Indian money or little pieces of animals that usually are in creeks or in water? Huh? Yeah. A little circle, curlicue, yeah. And so, where we live over there, where I grew up in Monroe County, like, say we'd go out to chop thistles or hoe thistles or fix fence or whatever, and my brother and I, again, telling on ourselves a lot, would find ourselves goofing off more than we'd work sometimes, and we'd be sitting around in a rocky place and digging around and doing, and find this, and it'd be on the tallest hill we have in the place. And then you start thinking, how'd they get here? Who brought that up here? Who brought those rocks up here? Well, God did. There was a flood, and the world was flooded. And when it settled down, there's evidence all over the place that there was a real flood and it happened, and that the Bible is true. And we can find little pieces of rock that prove it every day. How many proofs do we have to have that this just didn't happen? That there was a designer that designed this world and designed it for us to inhabitate and designed it for us to enjoy until it's time for us to answer for how we did that. How many times do we have to do that? Somebody think of some other things what's some other things that you can think of that are just biblical, that you would think just happenstance, or are not happenstance, that are just keep proving it over and over and over. I think it's a whole lot more believable that the Bible is real, that you can take 66 books of the Bible and that you can look at all the stories in there and how they do not contradict themselves and how they all come back to one thing and how they all are prophesy the coming of Christ and all the things that He did and all the miracles that He performed and all the ways He did, versus just thinking one time, one day, millions and millions and millions of years ago, something came from nothing, and then we were formed and everything else was formed with it. And it was so individual that it could work within its own species and it could work together. So let me play a little devil's advocate on the other side. If evolution is so true, then why don't we ever see any of these half beings, half things that would have, where are they at? Where's the fossils of, now we talked about last night, the fossils of dinosaurs. So if we find fossils of dinosaurs, then we pretty much understand that dinosaurs existed because we have fossils. Can't understand why we can't find fossils of Bigfoots, but That's right, Bigfoot. He's still the only one that I can't understand. That still got to be a believer, you know. Bigfoot. See, see, I know I got another Bigfoot. Yeah, I got it. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. One of these days we're going to find a Bigfoot fossil. But seriously, why, if evolution took all this time to do, and things changed why are we not finding a portion of that was a portion of something else, and a portion of this, and a portion of this, and why are we not finding that? Why does the science of observation, of theory, not point back to that? Because the study of that is science. So if it pointed to that, then maybe I could be a little bit better believer in that. Maybe I could. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. Where do we have somebody that's a quarter person and a 3/4 ape, and then we have somebody that's I know we can find some that we might think are a little bit 11, but you're right. Why do we not see portions of that, and why do we not see that evolution chain today continuing on, and why could we not follow that backwards? Now they act like they can, but they don't. They can draw you pictures of, but they don't find anything but humans and apes and tigers and lions and all these things. Now, there's some that go extinct, and there's some that can crossbreed. We understand what crossbreeding is, and we understand you can take a donkey, and you can take a horse, and you can make a mule. You can take two animals that are smaller and make a bigger animal than either one of them. There's certain species that you can do that with that are close enough. But humankind has never found one that could, and there's a reason for that, because that wasn't God's plan. That wasn't God's plan. Even in the Bible, we were talking about in Sunday school class the other morning, that riding the mule meant for more of a time of peace. Riding a horse was more of a time of wartime because it was a faster animal. So even in the Old Testament, they had mules. So they understood that they could breed those and have mules and have animals that were better pack horses, better pack, better. They had something they could do better than either one of the others without putting them together. That's okay. We can agree and understand that. But where's the evidence, like you say, of the other side of that? Where is that? So this is kind of where I would take this to, and maybe take this lesson, is kind of going almost 365 degrees with it, or not 365, 180, I guess. In society today, what has June in the last year or two, 3 or 4 years, become in our society? What are we, Pride Month. Pride in what? I mean, seriously, pride in what? Abomination. One of the abominable sins, one of the abominational sins, homosexuality. Now again, I think God loves everybody, and He wants everybody to turn away from their ways. And I don't think that sin is any different than any other sin. Any sin separates you from God. So let's not try to make that sin any worse than any other sin, but the practice of any sin will push you further and further away from God. So it's the practice of homosexuality, just like if it was the practice of drunkenness or if it was the practice of greed, or if it was the practice of pride itself. The word pride and what they're trying to promote is an oxymoron within itself. It is kind of like Pride Month. Was Christ prideful? Or was he humble and a servant? So why are we trying to celebrate something that is totally against God's Word? Think about where society is going with that. Now, just for the sake of doing it, let's go back and say that why, and Al asked this question last night, and I think I've got a theory to this. Why has society went in that direction? And he kind of answered it at the end, but I want to go deeper into that. Why celebrate Pride Month? Why celebrate just being whoever you want to be? Yeah. And he wants us to not have faith, does he not? I think, when somebody says, well, you have faith in evolution, no, I think you just have no faith is what you have. What you want, I really think the reason that, and this is my theory, you come up with your own, but my theory is that society is choosing to just cop out of having to have responsibility. Our whole society is looking for a way not to be responsible for anything, not to be responsible for your neighbor, not to be responsible for your child, not to be responsible for your own actions because somebody else made me do that. They made me act that way. I'm not responsible. You made me react that way because of something that you might have looked at me wrong, or you might have. But it's just easy to say that there's no ramifications for anything. If you have no faith, I will say this, if I believed that there was no designer and that there was no design and that evolution was real, then I can get on that bandwagon that all we really want to do is just be good to each other and live in harmony. And there's no rules. Just let everybody be who they are. And there's no laws to live by because there's no faith, because there's no answer at the end, and you're just as dead all over as Rover. When you die, that's it. It's over. You have nothing to answer for. All you have to do is just harmonize with the world. Yeah. Sure. Exactly. And that's what they want us to do, because they want to say that if you try to tell me that we have laws and rules, well, then that's not letting me be who I want to be. Then that imposes that I have responsibility to myself first, to be in control of my own actions and reactions. See, first and foremost, every person on this earth has to be born and has to die, and if they live long enough, has to become accountable for their actions. If they live to the age of accountability, then there's one day, and I don't think it just happens one day, it happens probably over a period of a few months or a year or two, but all at once you start having a conscience that, and that conscience is taught. It's a taught conscience of saying, how should I react and how should I treat my fellow people here on earth? And if you just think that everybody should live in harmony and everybody should carry a rainbow and everybody should just do anything you want to do because there is no laws in humanity, there is no laws that we are governed by, there is no Genesis 5 that says mankind was made from male and female, then you can do that. But what is that getting us, and where are we going with that? That is just the opposite of faith. That is having no faith in anything and saying that when we're dead, we're just dead, and it doesn't matter. All that mattered was what we were doing while we were here on earth, and there's no repercussion from it. So let me be the person I want to be, and let me be just as spoilt and jealous and conniving. And there's a lot of people out here says, oh, we want to be warm and hugging and loving, but they want to disband the law because we really don't want law, and we don't want laws, and we want somebody to come by and take our garbage away, and we want somebody to feed us, and we want somebody to house us, but we don't want to do any work for it. We just think we're entitled because we happen to be born. And again, when God ran man from the Garden of Eden, and when man sinned, then he said, here is your plight. You will earn your own keep, and you will have pain in childbearing. We will put enmity between the man and the woman. We will do all these things. All of that is because of sin. We had what the rainbow called, and I say that in a very loose term, but we had harmony on this world until sin. And then we have to pay for our sins. Mankind has to pay for the sins. And Christ had to come then and pay for all of those sins because of the fact that somebody has to pay. So again, if you're an evolutionist and you think the theory of evolution is where we came from, then what's the end result? When we die, we just go back and we're done. I don't think that's what we see every morning when we get up. I don't think that's what we see every morning, every night when we go to bed. I don't think that's what we see anytime we want to be a scientist and observe the theories of where we came from, and to watch the design of like begets like. And nature heals and takes care of itself, and we don't even understand why yet. And as smart as we are, we've never, ever, ever been able to create life without that first cell. And that first cell was created when God spoke it into existence. And when God spoke it into existence, now we have life. And He says, I give life, and I'm the taker of life. So, again, if the evolutionist is saying, I don't know where life came from, but God says, I gave life, and I can take life, that's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And that's the answer that they all keep looking for, but nobody can figure out because they keep looking in the wrong place. But again, the Bible just keeps talking and talking and telling us. The Old Testament is full of prophecies of how God told His people to wash their hands in running water, told them how to bury the dead, told them how to cleanse themselves after they had been in a bloody battle. Talked about there in Leviticus, there a portion that if you'd been in a battle, you came in and you washed and you did, and you stayed clean and away from food stuff for a period of time until you were cleansed, and then you ate. But that was all because God was the designer, and He understood the science before we had the opportunity and the know-how to observe so that we could use science for our benefit. But God designed that over and over and over. If anybody's ever cut themselves, and we all have cut and scratched and scraped, is it not amazing that our body will heal that cut? Just watch your own body and how it's amazing what it will adapt to if you will just allow it to. And how you can feel so tired at night, and you can lay down and rest, and you can wake up and you can be ready and energized and ready to do something else the next day. And that's by design. That's not by, if we had designed it, or if it just happened, why would we have to rest to renew? Why is all that happening? Why does it do that? What's the purpose? Again, we need to remember that we need to love everybody, but if we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything. And it's our job to spread the good news. And when every portion of our life is being inundated with people to try to tell us that sin should be celebrated, we are responsible for holding our time while we're here on earth so that the next generation has an opportunity to. And if we don't stand up for that in a Christ-like Christian way and let people know that that's not okay. Now, as a lawmaker, I will stand up for your rights to do whatever you think you want to do in your home when you're of age, and you have the right to make your decision because you're going to answer for that. But at the same time, as a lawmaker, we try to make laws that are biblically principled so that people can live in harmony and that we can freely observe the right to worship and the right to have faith instead of having no faith and being faithless, so that we don't have to be accountable. I think that's the theory I have, is people want to have no faith is because they don't want to be accountable. With that, has anybody got anything else? No? Mike, will you lead us in a word of prayer? Amen.